Toyota has 2 more cars to work with this year at Daytona. Is 2 cars enough to notice a difference?
Yeah, I think what it will allow us to do is kind of set our own strategy. Like we just had to latch on to whatever group pitted either first or last, whatever we wanted to do. We never could set our own strategy of when we decided to pit. We always had to pit with others. So this hopefully will give us enough car count to be able to do that. That's the biggest change I think that the Toyotas will finally see, is to have enough cars to set their own strategy instead of latching onto someone else's.
I guess it'd be 3 if Jimmy qualifies.
Yep. Front row.
Right. Bold prediction.
Bold prediction.
I'm curious, outside of your Daytona race wins, which is typically the answer to this question you usually have, is there any like moment throughout your storied career at Daytona that really sticks out to you?
I mean, I would say the 2004 Daytona 500, the one that Dale Jr. won. It's just a great memory because of how the whole weekend played out. Like that, to me, was...
That's the one you ended in victory lane with him with, right?
Correct. The one that you saw the picture on our social media about where I'm in victory lane. I'm actually standing next to my future bus driver that has been working with me now for the last 10 plus years or so. So if you look just to the right of me is he was John Atkins. He was the bus driver for DEI at the time, and so I was standing next to him. I don't even think I said a word to him in victory lane that day. We just happened to be in the same photo op, and then I look and it's funny because I got a text. Gosh, I can't remember the name, but he's like, "Hey, I got a picture here." And that was framed in my office. He works at RCR now in comms. And he's like, I looked at that picture, and it's been in my office for forever. He's like, it was the victory lane picture. He's like, he looked up, and he says, what the hell is Denny Hamlin doing in that picture? And it was the picture of him and me and John and Dale Jr. and Josh Snyder and all those guys in victory lane. He's like, what the hell was he in that picture for? And so I just, that was the moment where that weekend, I was actually on iRacing. It was NASCAR 2003 back then. And Dale Jr. was just like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, not much. He's like, you want to come down to Daytona? I'm like, sure. Drove 9.5 hours down there. He's like, I got a place for you to stay. I'm like, all right, well, where do I stay? He's like, well, if you don't stay with me on the bus, then we'll just, I got a spot for you at this little rental house. I'm like, okay. So I go to the rental house, and I'm staying with Martin Truex and somebody else, and he just basically had all of his Dirty Mo buddies in this house. It's crazy, and that's the true story, right? And so I remember sitting there, and I'm going to the track, and that actual weekend I signed my development deal with Joe Gibbs Racing. So I remember at the end of the race, I was a guest of Dale Jr., so I'm in his bus watching the race. But the day before, I just signed my deal with Joe Gibbs Racing, but I didn't really feel comfortable like hanging out with them or piggybacking off them. So it was a battle between Tony Stewart and Dale Jr. that day. And I remember walking, it was 20 laps to go, and I'm thinking like, what pit box do I kind of hang out behind? Do I do, I'll just go to Dale Jr.'s. And I remember when I'm walking behind the pit boxes, I hear the crowd, and I look up, and that's when he made the move on the backstretch to pass Tony. And then, I just hung out the rest of the time in victory lane, and then carried that trophy after we did all the photo ops to the bus for him. So it was a cool memory because I'd never been to Daytona before. And so that was a great memory for me to go through the tunnel for the first time, experience the Daytona 500 for the first time. And again, I didn't know what my pathway was to actually competing in the Daytona 500. I didn't know 2 years later that I was going to be competing in it. I was still just racing late models at the time. I didn't have any job. So other than working at my dad's trailer shop. So crazy that 2 years later I competed in it and actually won the shootout 2 years later. Actually, now I'll think about it to the day. So, and this is crazy. Now I'm thinking about it. And beat Tony Stewart and Dale Jr. If you look at the photo op from the 2006 Daytona, the shootout, they tied for second, and I won the race. That's crazy, right? Crazy stuff. So that was my favorite Daytona memory. Besides winning, of course.
Yeah, no,
2016.
that was a great answer. Dear Denny, now that you've been in the new Camry, what are your thoughts on it?
It's too early to tell, but I mean, it drives like the old Camry. I don't know what to say. I can't tell the difference from the driver's seat. Not in the current time and period. We haven't been at a track that's got enough speed in it to really know any of the characteristics. But for those who don't know, like when we have a new car, like the new Camry XSE this year, everything else is the same. So when I strap in, all I can see is my dash, all the roll bars, everything around me, and that's exactly the same as it was last year. So I don't feel any difference yet. Again, I don't know if I need to drive it differently on a
Will you
bigger track
feel
or
difference like in the draft potentially this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, it'd be interested. I've got to learn how it drafts. That's one thing that'll be crucial for us this weekend is to understand, the air certainly is not going to be coming off the front nose the same as the old Camry. So what do I need to then find these pockets of air that's going to make my car go forward? So I'm going to have to play around with that a little bit in practice to understand where the new holes are in this draft. So I think it'll take some learning. We're going to, certainly in practice, I would imagine we're probably going to connect bumpers to see, is this thing stable or not? How aggressive can I be pushing teammates? How hard can I hit them without getting them out of shape? That's all going to have to be kind of a trial and error. And it's going to be the same for the Ford guys as well, right? We don't know how our bumper's going to connect to the Fords and the Chevys. So we're going to learn it all on the fly.
So trial and error in the duels on Thursday?
Probably. I would think so, because usually these practices amount to you're going out there with your manufacturer teammates. Not many people mix it up anymore in practice because of the strain it puts if you wreck on your team. So, yeah, I would imagine that it's going to be the duels is where we're going to start to play around with that.
I mean, that seems pretty significant if you're going to have to learn this
it is.
in the first race.
Yeah, but a lot of people are.
Yeah, except for the Chevy guys, right?
What? No, because they're connecting to a different bumper as well.
Fair.
From front and back, right? So everyone is.
Any other racing things you want to talk about? I got one more question on here, but it's not racing related.
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Threw a few bold predictions out there. There's a few over-unders on drivers. I'm ready to get 2024 going. When you kind of digest this whole Chastain-Larson thing, you definitely have to go back earlier